Hi everyone, this is Yana and I'm excited to share a card making video today using a couple of my favorite supplies. The project I'm showing in this video was inspired by a travel photo. I often draw inspiration for my cards from the world around me, and I quickly become inspired by something like a color combination I see in a magazine or in somebody's home. I can be inspired by an ad I see online and a lot of other things. Sometimes products themselves inspire me to create. To create the card I'm sharing in this video, I'll be using a couple of supplies. A Beautiful Day stamp set from Altenew. This is a color layering set where you have multiple layers of one image and you stamp it to create a colored like image. However, a few images here are just outline images that can be colored the usual way. Here are the two flowers created using this stamp set side by side. The pink one was actually stamped. It wasn't colored, but it was stamped using corresponding layers in different shades of pink ink. The blue flower was quickly watercolored in blue, and you can see how big of a difference there is. I have used this set a number of times for my cards, and I've always used layers, but never actually stamped just the outline, so this is what I'll be doing in this video. I also have a couple of sentiment stamps, the Superscript and Label Love sets from Altenew, and I also have a pack of stunning vintage trims from Altenew. I'll be using this timeless rectangle frame in gold. I just love using their trims on my projects. If you don't have a trim like this, you can try to die cut something out of gold mirror cardstock, but I think these trims are just fantastic and really take your cards to a whole new level. I also picked brass embossing powder to match the color of my trim. I guess I should have said that it's brass and not gold. I'm trying to force myself to kind of use less gold, so this is why I'm going with brass here. But you can by all means go ahead and use gold. I also grabbed a sheet of gold glitter paper. This one is from Tim Holtz and it's self-adhesive. However, I did use American Crafts self-adhesive glitter tape on my card here. But I couldn't find the roll of that glitter tape when I started filming this video, so I pulled up this Tim Holtz paper instead, which is, just as good. To do my watercoloring, I'll be using Prima water-soluble oil pastels. These are gorgeous and have such yummy colors. I love using them. I'll be using light blue and black today. And finally, I also have my Arches cold press watercolor paper, which is my all-time favorite watercolor paper. I'm going to start by heat embossing the two flower images onto my watercolor paper. I've prepped the surface of the paper with an anti-static powder tool to keep my embossing nice and clean, inked up my flower stamp with clear sticky ink and stamped it. I'm also stamping a few leaves or branches and a beautiful floral cluster or something like a bouquet, I guess. I'm adding brass embossing powder on top and heat setting it to melt. You'll notice I only stamped the leaf branches partially. I didn't need the entire branch for this project. I only needed the top 3 leaves from this image. Now that I have that heat embossed, I'm going to begin quickly coloring. The technique I'm using today is called Wet Watercolor, and the idea is to get your paper wet before you add any color to it. I'm first using my brush and clean water to wet the image, and once the paper becomes wet, I come in with the brush and bring the pigment. With these water-soluble oil pastels, you can go directly to paper, but you will end up having a much more vibrant, much more saturated look. You will get a lot more color. I didn't want to have a lot of color here, so I used a brush to pick up the pigment and bring it to my image. Another reason I didn't want to go directly to paper with these is because they leave marks on this particular paper. You can see that here. I added pigment directly to the paper and now trying to spread it using a wet brush, but I'm still getting some marks left on my paper. So I also colored my second flower, and you can see that these are by no means perfect, and I wasn't trying to make them perfect. I also didn't want to spend a lot of time coloring these, so I only did some basic watercoloring here. For the leaves, I selected black color. I added water to the paper and just barely touched the paper with my brush that had already picked up some pigment to let the pigment flow and spread onto the image. You can also see that I'm going outside the heat embossed lines here. All of these images will be cut out later, and I will be cutting them right up to the edge, so that doesn't really matter if the color goes outside the lines or stays inside. Truth be told, this is probably my most favorite form of watercolor. I wet the paper, I drop the pigment, and I watch the magic happen. I never get tired of this. It's just fascinating how that color moves on the paper. While my images are drying and I didn't want to use my heat tool this time, I started working on the sentiment. I used VersaFine Onyx Black ink to stamp the gorgeous hello from the superscript stamp set from Altenew, and also to heat emboss a love you label using the same brass embossing powder I used for the outlines of my images. I usually stamp label images like this one using ink, but I wanted to have additional texture on this project, so this is why I decided to heat emboss it. Once it was done, I cut it out with my scissors and used a matching die for the big hello to die cut that out on my Artisan Explorer machine. Now that my watercolored images were dry, I started cutting them out and decided I needed to add more color or more highlights to one of the flowers. This time I applied color with the same brush but over dry paper, and you can see how much more intense the color ended up being on those folds of the petals. It just added a nice touch to my flowers, I think. Once I had all of the images cut out, I used the same stamps and white pigment ink and stamped a large flower, a leafy branch, and a little bouquet in white onto a panel of Audrey blue cardstock from Simon Says Stamp. You can leave this panel as is, but I wanted to add some, I don't know, distraction or texture to the background, so this is why I stamped those in white. I really love stamping images in white ink over colored cardstock for that nice and soft look. All we have to do now is assemble our card. I'm using foam adhesive squares to adhere one of the flowers on top of the frame, then adding the second flower behind the frame, so basically sandwiching the gold frame in between the flowers. Next, adding the little bouquet, and I'm going to foam mount the frame onto my blue panel, and we'll add the little leaf clusters to complete this look. Lastly, I'm adding my sentiment, first foam mounting the die cut Love one. Now, because I'm adding it over somewhat an uneven surface, I added a double layer of foam adhesive to one side of the die cut and a single layer to the other side of the die cut to help it stay flat and level on my card. I'm using grid lines off my cutting mat to make sure I adhere the sentiment straight. I did not want it going at an angle here. I also foam mounted the Love You sentiment and added a couple of clear droplets from Pretty Pink Posh. I didn't adhere them at this point, I only planned how I wanted those placed. I'm trimming a strip of gold glitter paper and adding it to the right side of my card base. I love that this paper is self-adhesive and this glitter also doesn't come off, so no mess on my desk. Yay for that! Okay, using my Grand Tape Runner and adhering my panel onto my card base, I'm going to use Multi-Matte Medium to adhere the little droplets and finish making this project. So this is it for today. I hope you enjoyed watching this video and feel inspired to create. Be sure to look around you and try to find something inspirational today. Maybe an ad in a magazine, a beautiful photo on Pinterest, or just, a fun color combination to try. If you like this card idea in this video, please give it a thumbs up, drop me a comment, I love hearing from you, and maybe share this video with a crafty friend. I have lots more card ideas on my YouTube channel, feel free to check them out for additional inspiration. Thanks so much for watching, I'll see you next time. Bye!